working on this process in its formal process for annexation since about the first of the year. The town has adopted an ordinance that annexed the school district into the city limits. A condition of that ordinance was a development agreement and an annexation agreement. So those are the two documents that we've presented to you in draft form in your agenda packet. As you might note, there's a lot of these items have been worked out between school district staff and town staff, but there are a couple of remaining items that we're still working on nailing down the final nuts and bolts. There is the annexation agreement is getting pretty close. And then the development agreement also is pretty close, with a couple of pretty big topics that we're trying to kind of nail down the final numbers. You might note that in the development agreement, there's a highlighted section related to stormwater drainage, impact fees. And at the time this agenda packet was prepared, we did not have any numbers for the impervious surfaces to calculate the impact fee for drainage. And we do have that now. We've received the information from the school district after this agenda packet was put out, but we've since calculated that number, so we have that now. There's just a couple of high-level topics that still need the final wrinkles ironed out. Water and water rights dedication, some off-site road improvements. We now have the storm drainage. So just those couple of items are what's waiting to get the final agreements kind of ironed out. You've got the drafts in front of you. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have regarding those draft agreements. And then, of course, because we still have some remaining items outstanding, staff is recommending that the item be tabled to the following meeting to allow town staff and school district staff the opportunity to work out these final numbers. Be happy to
board members, got any comments on this?
This is Tim Whitehouse. I do have just one comment. It's interesting, under Section G, road impact fee, they talk about over 3,000 average daily vehicle trips. That number seems pretty high to me, having my shop over that area. I find it amusing that the school district suggested that the traffic impact study, there were really no need for any offside road improvements. I find that kind of amusing.
Anyone else? So looks like we don't have the agreement all ready to go, so we're going to table it to give you some time to work out the details. Cody, that's what we're doing.
Yeah, that's staff's recommendation. Obviously, it's tough to execute an agreement where the final details aren't yet worked out. It was a desire of the school district, and the town shares the desire to, of course, move this along as expeditiously as possible. We've just gotten some new information from the school district last week regarding some of the water demand for the site. And so we're digesting that information and working with the school district staff to kind of further refine that number. So we are still kind of a little bit of work in progress on these couple of big items, but we're making slow and steady progress, and we'd like to bring it back to the board at a later date. August 25th.
I agree. Do you think doing 1 week is enough? Do you want to give it two or three?
You know, the last conversations we had with school district staff was that their board wanted to take action on it on the 25th. We've been working towards that mutual goal. My recommendation would be, let's table it to the 25th to allow the opportunity. And if it's not ready, obviously the school district board would like to approve this concurrently with the town board, so we're all on the same page.
Yeah, okay.
And my understanding was that they were still aiming for the 25th. So if it's all right with the board, I'd recommend we table it to the 25th. We can always table it again if we still need more time.
Okay, good enough. Well, that being said, if there's any other comments, I'd like to entertain a motion to table this annexation agreement to the 25th meeting.
So moved.
Second.
It's roll call, please.
Trustee Gator?
Yes.
Trustee Jerome?
Yes.
Trustee Kenny?
Yes.
Trustee McDonald?
Yes.
Trustee Whitehouse?
Yes.
Mayor Hammond?
Yes. Okay. Move on to our next item, C2. This is a resolution number 28-2020 raw water dedication fee in lieu of rates. Cody's going to present.
Yeah, so if it's all right with you guys, we've got some crazy backlighting, so I'm going to go ahead and turn my video off just to kind of clear up that distraction. I'm going to go ahead and start this presentation, but I've also got Bob Gowing, Public Works Director, who's done a lot of work on this with us as well, and so he might chime in at any point. So just by way of a quick introduction, what's before the board tonight is a draft resolution. This resolution is proposed to reestablish the raw water dedication requirement and the cash in lieu rate in lieu of water dedication. For some background context, the town last changed or updated the raw water cash in lieu rate in April of 2017. That's been a little over 3 years now since the raw water rate was adjusted. And in that time, the share prices for water have grown exponentially. And our cash rates have not kept up with that pace. So what we've attempted to do with the numbers on this resolution are to reflect the current market pricing for shares of water that we need for this town to continue to grow. What we've done is one thing that's new in this proposed resolution is we've identified a split for indoor consumption and outdoor use. This we feel is vitally important for Wellington's future because there are two very different needs. And as you can see, it's a pretty close to 50% split, but not quite. But we do think it's important as we know the scarce resource is only going to grow scarcer to be able to conserve and adjust our fees appropriately based on demand. So we are proposing that indoor-outdoor split. As you can see, the prices are growing consistently with the market rates for North Poudre shares. And we feel that our pricing, our cash and lieu price, if we continue to accept cash, needs to reflect that as well. I'd be happy to stand for any questions regarding the resolution. And Mr. Gowing, if you have anything you'd like to add, or if you just want to stand for questions, that'd be appropriate at this time.
I might add just a couple of things. This is Bob Gowing, Public Works Director. If you recall, when we talked about this earlier, and the basis of this is to determine the indoor annual water usage and the average annual outdoor water usage, and encourage the dedication of shares for that. We also, if we were going to allow, and keep in mind the current code requires shares, and the staff may agree to take fee in lieu if appropriate. Because of the scarcity of North Poudre shares and our own inability to buy as many shares as we would like, and I think most of the builders and developers would agree that North Poudre shares are scarce, we have made the assumption that we will not be able to purchase these shares for an average of a year. So if you're talking about 200 building permits and we actually want to buy the shares with the fee in lieu as soon as we can, well, that's a substantial amount of shares, more shares than we've been able to buy in one bunch in 1 year's time forever. So we basically took the historic market value of North Poudre and calculated the inflation and applied that to the current market value for 1 year. And that inflation rate is impressive. It's about 40%. So at the current market value of 200, you're at roughly 280,000 when we might be at the midpoint of the time frame at which we could purchase these shares ourselves with the fee in lieu money. And that's what we're using for the market value calculation for the fee in lieu. So if the the developer builder would prefer to dedicate shares, which we would also prefer, they would obviously do that at current rates or at the market values that they had when they bought those shares back in the past. So that number, that actual value in terms of shares is significantly lower than the fee in lieu because we're adding that 1 year's worth of inflation. And so the rates that you see in here include that assumption of 1 year of inflation to allow us time to actually find and purchase these shares. And the calculations are fairly straightforward at that point. We're looking for 0.32 acre feet for indoor use. That's based on standard benchmarks, national and regional benchmarks. And we've kind of proofed those against typical demand here in town. And an outdoor use based on an irrigated 7,000 acre foot lot as kind of an average lot with an average size house and a driveway, which obviously wouldn't need irrigation. And basically came up with the amount of the volume of water annually per house needed there. So fairly simple. We do want to encourage non-pot systems. So we have made it clear that if you have a non-pot system that's approved by that we feel comfortable would be sustainable, that's a substantially lower fee than if you don't bring a non-pot system. So that's how the rates were generated, and it's fairly simple. It's based on our needs and our kind of unique raw water sourcing situation that we've discussed several times, and I'd be open to any further questions on that.
The board members will open up to questions from you.
So I did have a question. So Mr. Gowling, just so I understand if you're correct, the obviously the number is substantially higher on the fee in lieu for what it used to be, but is it correct my understanding that the developers are not required to pay that fee if they are going to just dedicate straight water shares? Is that correct?
That is correct. And in fact, the standard is to dedicate water shares. We traditionally have not, we've allowed fee in lieu quite often in the past because shares are hard to come by. But we would frankly prefer dedicated shares and believe that that's by far the most cost-effective approach for the developer / builder as well.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I had a question. I think we all received a letter from Mr. Hoover from Hartford Homes. He raises some issues. I'm not sure if his pricing is correct, but certainly one of the questions, and I pose this, is what sort of outreach and comments have you had to the developers? I mean, as far as I've known, this is the first comment I've heard from a developer. Might you be able to address that, please?
Cody might actually be better poised to answer that. I know he's been talking to some developers on a kind of more of a one-on-one basis. We haven't had any formal presentations of this outside of what the board has seen for developers. But certainly we've been talking about this for some time now. And Cody, I don't know if you want to discuss some of the informal outreach that you've done.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Gowing. This is Cody Bird, Planning Director again. Bob's right. This is something that obviously water's been top of mind for everyone in the Front Ranges in the development world. And we've certainly had numerous conversations with developers and builders over the last couple of years. The water rates, as we've seen them continue to climb, we have had conversation after conversation with developers and builders, basically notifying them that the town's water rates are going to have to increase respectively at some point, and we've reached that point. Throughout all those conversations, and certainly after we notified the development community of the public hearing on this particular resolution, most of the feedback we got from developers was similar to Mr. Hoover's email response received today. And that comment was, we understand the rates need to go up, but that's a big number. And we agree, it is a big number when we haven't updated those rates in the last 3 years. And so it is a little bit of a shock to the development community to see that big of a jump all at once. But it's certainly no surprise to see the rates going up.
Well, Cody, you know, I know it was a shock for them to see our numbers go up, but are they shocked when they see the North Poudre share price go up too?
I can't speculate as to their reactions to the market rates, but I would imagine their reactions were somewhat similar to all of ours when we go to purchase shares from time to time. I think no one is, I think I would say that everyone is equally dissatisfied with the price jumps that we've seen in the last couple of years. Unfortunately, we don't have any control over those numbers.
So I have a follow-up question. I mean, and it's my belief that the pricing that you said, obviously the cash and lieu price is to allow for the possible inflation over a 1-year period of time. But so the price you're setting represents the true cost to the town to provide this resource, except for that inflationary factor, correct?
I would say that it is truly our best estimate as to the true cost, because when a developer writes that check, we can't go out the next day and buy 30 shares. They're not on the market. So this is something we'll need to evaluate moving forward. Right now, frankly, to you know, lessen the blow a little bit, we're going to assume that we can purchase those shares in a year. If that looks like it's not going to be the case, we'll be forced to adjust, because otherwise the town would be picking up the balance in terms of the inflation of the North Poudre shares. And I don't think that that's the intent of the board, and certainly the staff as well.
This is Brad. It also ought to be pointed, and Bob already pointed this out, so I'm just reiterating it, but the goal from the town's perspective is to have the developer provide the shares. And so that's the first choice. And if the developer can buy the shares cheaper, by all means, the town will accept the shares. And so part of this is to encourage the developers to get out there and start stockpiling shares as well. You'll remember when we went through the last purchase of shares, everyone said, well, you know, developers would buy these otherwise, and that may be true. We're in a competitive market with other water users, and this should encourage developers to start stockpiling shares so that they can turn them into the town to meet the town's needs.
Yeah, that's what we're after. We prefer help at finding shares, because we've been after it for 2 years and it's very difficult.
I have a question for Mr. Bird. Mr. Bird, would it be acceptable for a developer to bring an equivalent amount of CBT shares? Like, I know the CBT shares equate out to a smaller yield of water, but if they bundled some CBT shares together and they equated 1 Poudre share, would those be accepted as well? Or are we only accepting North Poudre irrigation shares? Because I think we should clarify that too, that these are irrigation shares and not municipal shares.
That's correct, Ms. McDonald, and this is Cody Bird. The prior ordinance adopted by the town that set our rates that are in place today did allow for contributions of CBT shares. You'll notice that the current resolution before you also allows that flexibility. The nuance that I think I have to point out is that not to make a short of it or make light of it, but not all water shares are the same. And delivery of CBT means something very different than delivery of North Poudre shares in a physical way, physically providing the water. And there are some different losses that take place when you do exchanges of those CBT shares versus the North Poudre shares. And there's some other limitations on how those shares are used by the end users. And so there's a little bit of nuance that has to be considered when the town is accepting shares. But we do have the ability to accept CBT. The town also reserves the right in this resolution to decline shares if those don't suit our purposes. So I think we just need to make very conscious and deliberate decisions on what shares are accepted.
If I could just add to that real briefly, this is Bob Gowing again. We have a method to deliver North Poudre shares to our water plant. because we're buried right in the middle of the North Pooter Irrigation Company system. There is no mechanism right now to get CBT up here. It would potentially take a substantial amount of infrastructure improvements to enable that. But in general, we're talking about going further south and bringing that physical water up here to Wellington. Whereas we have a very robust North Pooter infrastructure system for delivery of water that we sit right in the middle of. So just from a practical point of view, there's a reason why we pull our water from North Pooter now, and that's because of just our geographic location.
If I could add to that too, my sense is, this is Brad March, my sense is if someone came to the town with CBT units, there is a fairly good chance we would look at those. One of the reasons that we don't have any CBT units in our current water portfolio, one of the reasons is that it generally is assumed that a CBT unit, there are 4 CBT units attached to a North Pooter share. That having been said, North Pooter is selling at $200,000 a share, thereabouts. CBT units at one point were going as high as $60,000. That's a higher cost for a CBT unit. So most people have not wanted to bring them. In the event somebody came to the town with a request to bring CBT, my sense is the town would entertain that, at least my office would entertain it reasonably favorably, because I think there are abilities to trade out the right to use CBT against the right to use North Pooter. And I think we could make some arrangements, but that would also require us to talk to North Pooter and see how we could make that happen. There are delivery issues.
Understood.
Thank you, Mr. March. That was the information that I was looking for an answer to.
Okay.
I have a couple comments.
Go ahead.
First of all, I appreciate this effort and that we're looking into this, because obviously water prices to our water users, they shouldn't carry the entire burden of some of our water crisis that we're in right now. So when we're talking about raising water rates and then also looking at this simultaneously, I feel like it is the responsible action from our board and our town to say that this burden should be held by developers as well as by those who use that utility as water rates. So that's the first thing I did want to acknowledge, that we are doing and looking into this. So I do appreciate that. I want that to be known by the folks who are on the call. But secondly, at the same time, on the other end of that, when we talk about these raised rates for in lieu of water, and with the assumption that that will occur rather than bringing water to the table, those costs will be, in my mind, passed down directly to those people buying those houses. So what I have to think down the road is that makes Wellington likely considerably less affordable for people to build and live in Wellington. So part of me, that kind of hurts my heart, because being affordable housing is something that Wellington has been known for, and a lot of families for their first time homes or whatever the case might have been, have had an easier time becoming part of our community. And that might not be the case in the future. So that's another point that I wanted to bring up. Thirdly, the other point I wanted to talk about is there is a concern for outstanding growth in Wellington, which is generally initiated by affordable housing. So by doing this and essentially charging what water is actually worth, being more fair in that process, we will likely slow the growth of Wellington. So I did want to acknowledge that as well. Those are the 3 major takeaways that I have from this resolution. Outside of that, there are some grammatical errors that I want to make sure we do acknowledge if we were to approve this, including the date, and then missing period and item in the first section, and then multiple commas in number 3, but just some grammatical things there. But those are my overall items. I am in favor of this resolution, regardless of those points, but I do want to make sure that people know that I consider them and I take them seriously with those long-term consequences for Wellington based on the benefits that would provide.
Anyone else want to weigh in?
I would like to
Question for
Trustee
Bob
Green.
and Cody. At our work session, you provided us with a draft of this proposal, and there's a significant change between that draft and this current draft. I was wondering if you could explain why there's such a significant change.
I'll certainly take a stab at it, Mr. Jerome. Were you referring to the change in the cost numbers, or something different?
No, the cost numbers.
Okay, thanks. So I'll take a stab at it, and then I'll invite Mr. Gowing to jump in as well, because we've both been working on this. But the original kind of version that we presented in the work session, we were trying to hone in on a methodology for what was going to be palatable for the indoor use, outdoor use calculations. And we were trying to still zero in on what to factor in for inflation. We went through a series of iterations on those numbers, trying to come up with what was the most accurate and still palatable for development in this community to continue. So there were some changes to the actual numbers. The biggest change, I think, was taking a closer look at how to factor in inflation.
Okay. So the inflation part's is the biggest caveat here that's changed between last week and this week.
This is Bob Gowing again. More specifically, the item that we presented to you previously assumed a 3-year period before we'd be able to purchase the shares. So 3 years worth of inflation.
Okay. And then I have a follow-up question too. Being we're breaking it down into indoor, outdoor use with the assumption that newer developments will have non-pot for irrigation purposes. What safeguards are we going to be able to put in place to ensure that folks who pay an indoor use only impact fee do not use their indoor use water for outdoor use? Example, I know that several of the neighborhoods that use non-pot water have had pump issues, leaks in their lines, and during the hottest days of this year so far, they were without their irrigation system working properly. So folks were hooking their hose to their home, their indoor use water, and using that for outdoor use. Now I know they're going to pay it on their monthly bill, but at the same time, if we're going to charge an impact fee for strictly indoor use, and they have that opportunity to use it outdoors, and they do use it outdoors, I believe there should be some type of penalty or some safeguard to protect that. Because I mean, it's real easy to, say, okay, we're just going to use indoor use, and then all of a sudden they decide not to put a sprinkler system in connected to the non-pot system for whatever reason, and then are using indoor use water for outdoor use. I understand that they're going to pay for it on their bill, but I mean, you have to look at all the scenarios in my mind. So I didn't see anything in this that would safeguard against that. Would that be something that would be done in a development agreement? I guess I just want a little clarification on that, because I just know that it's happened in the past and it will happen in the future. So I think that, if we're talking about everybody paying their fair share, that's part of paying your fair share too, if you use indoor use water that you paid for outdoor use. So that's it. That's my question. Sorry, long-winded.
I would guess those would be pretty short-term uses, John.
Right, but still, the fact that it's happening, and they did not pay for that, is, I mean, frankly, it's unfair for somebody that is paying, pays for their indoor use and outdoor use, and then somebody that's just paid their indoor use using their indoor use water for outdoor use at all. I mean, that's completely unfair. I know that at one point, I thought one of the subdivisions where all the homes were built with no hose bibs on the outside of the house for that particular reason. So I guess I'm just looking for clarification. I mean, if the majority of the board believes that that's not an issue, then, you know, I guess it doesn't really matter. But I thought I had to bring it up because I know it's already happened this year so far in at least 2 of the neighborhoods that I know of that have wells, that their wells weren't working and people were watering off their hose bib.
Mr. Joe, I can maybe able to provide some history at least.
One moment. I do have a point of information. Okay. From my understanding with this resolution, this does only involve raw water costs. If somebody were to be using their potable water to water their yard, they would indeed pay for that water through their standard water rates, right? This is talking about raw water costs.
Let me see if I can
This
provide
is raw water to begin with. That's the whole point of bringing these shares, is to get that raw water. So they didn't pay for the raw water up front. So they're only paying for the potable water at the end. I guess I'm looking at the big picture that if there's 2 different tiers of impact fee, indoor use, outdoor use. So if you buy or if you build a home that doesn't have non-pot, you pay both tiers. If you have a home that's a non-pot system, then you only pay for your indoor use. But say that non-pot system fails, what if it fails for the entire summer? So now they're watering off of their hose bib from their indoor use only that they paid for. They didn't pay for outdoor use. They only paid for indoor use. I mean, that's not particularly fair in my mind.
Where in the resolution does it say for like single family houses, potable versus non-potable? I'm not seeing that in there. So I guess
indoor use, outdoor use.
Indoor and outdoor.
Indoor and outdoor. It's right in there.
We're only separated by single family and multifamily from what I can see.
No.
Indoor and outdoor from the one I've got.
Let me see if I can provide some clarification. This is Brad March. What historically has happened within the town is that certain subdivisions have put in non-potable water systems, and those non-potable water systems, when they're put in, afford the developer a reduction in raw water contribution costs. That's been done in most of the new subdivisions, certainly on the westerly side of the interstate. Those at one time, those systems are traditionally managed by covenants, and the town has certain rights under the covenants that are put in place to require that those systems remain operational. Those systems are not, I mean, they're not perfect. The town can step in under the covenants and take over operations. They can make assessments. They can collect amounts. There are certain rights the town has. It's been recognized that over the course of time, these systems do fail. They don't go down. The town, among other things, holds or should hold, and we ought to check these and make sure they're in place. The town held security deposits to ensure that in the event that those systems went down, someone would be able to step in and remedy the problem. When a developer provides assurances that they will provide that outdoor system, then the town will generally provide a reduction in the costs. In some of those older subdivision agreements, that has been as much as a 50% reduction in the raw water charge, and that we're bound by those. To the degree that we have agreements that are out there that says will give us a 50% reduction in raw water, that's what we have to do. One of the things that this agreement says is we'll abide by those agreements. But for going forward, this resolution, or this resolution sets forth that what the town will do is it will impose a specific allocation for outdoor and indoor use. And so if a new developer comes in, that's the allocation unless they can prove otherwise, and that would have to be changed by the board. But we do have the ability, John, to address your question. And it would be somewhat extreme, but the town has the ability to step in, and to the degree that the homeowners association, for example, is not operating that system properly, there should be an account that is set up, that was set up by the developer, and that account stands good to make any repairs, and the town can go in and make those repairs if need be and charge the association for doing it and take the money out of that account, and then can require that that amount be replenished. In most cases, the town has come back and said, okay, we want some assurances this is happening. I think the town is probably getting much more proactive in making sure that that's happening. I know I got a call from a local from a property owner in one of those subdivisions and contacted Mr. Gowing. Mr. Gowing sent somebody from his office out, and they jumped up and down on the HOA saying, look, this needs to be brought up to operational standards again. And my understanding is that happened.
I still have
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
bit of information. I'm still confused because I see nothing in this resolution, unless I'm totally overreading it, that says any distinction or exemptions on potable versus non-potable irrigation for single. Am I missing?
Right above Troy's signature, which, let me list the
Page 36.
Okay. There's a table. It says raw water dedication requirement. And then to the left, it says indoor use, outdoor use.
I see
That's
that.
what
Potable versus, so is outdoor use defined as non-potable? Is that?
No. Indoor use is for the toilets and stuff inside the house. Outdoor use would be the water that they would use on the lawn if it came through our water system. They have a net, so the indoor use, they would pay $37,376 if they had a non-potable system in the neighborhood. If they didn't, then they would be required to also pay the $30,210 for outdoor use, because they would be using city water to water their lawn. And that was my question, is if somebody buys a home in a neighborhood with non-potable irrigation, they would only pay the indoor use. But if they had a catastrophic failure with their system or whatever reason, it was down and they started using city water to water their lawn, which they did not pay for under this agreement, what's the ramifications or the remedies that we could recoup the money that should have been paid to us in the beginning. So I was just wanting to see what the safeguards we would have to protect that once this is, a agreement is executed, that they're not using treated water from the town as irrigation, even if, because their irrigation system isn't working at that time.
So my question here, I just want to be really clear on my question, because I'm still not understanding it. It could be me being dense, but is there an indication in this resolution that single family homes are exempt from the outdoor use raw water, regardless of potable or non-potable? I don't see that. That's that's the confusion. So everyone.
Let me see if I can clarify further. This is Brad March again. What occurs, and Trustee Jerome is absolutely right. The thought is this is intended to be a guide. What occurs is that there has been a general requirement that a developer has to dedicate so much water for the use for homes, for each residential structure within a development. What the town has done, and this has not always been uniform, but the town has come back and looked at that on a case-by-case basis and said, all right, if you put in a non-potable system, we'll reduce the amount of your water contribution by some percentage. And that could be, that percentage was usually negotiated. That could be as high as 50% if all non-potable was covered, or if all yard irrigation was covered. Perhaps in some subdivisions, there might have been only a portion of the subdivision that was covered by non-potable. The idea in this resolution is that it's setting an actual percentage of what is raw water needed for in-home and out-of-home use, so that when those development agreements are used, that's the starting point. Now, that doesn't mean they're not negotiable, and that doesn't mean that we can't come back and change them, and the board has to approve those reductions in water fees. But that's what we're approving. That's what this section of the proposed resolution does, is it reduces, as a starting point, the amount of water contribution you would normally have to make if you're going to provide if you're only needing to provide for indoor water use and don't need to provide for outdoor. If you have to provide for both, then you have to give the total number.
I understand everything you're saying, and I'm reading the resolution. The only thing in the resolution that says there's any additional calculations that's written within it is regarding multifamily housing. There's nothing in there that says an additional negotiation. So, I mean, if we're approving a resolution, is it not as written, or is this just a starting point and then additional negotiations for everyone?
There would be supplemental agreements that the developer would enter into.
Okay, so
That's
in that case, in my mind, this exemption for non-potable, where you're reducing the outdoor use, I feel like that should be included in there, because otherwise I'm seeing every single family home, regardless of potable and non-potable, has these requirements as listed in the table available in the resolution.
That's true. And I think
I read in the resolution, and I understand all the background, and I understand the concern non-potable, potable. That's really important. But what I don't see is any of that in this resolution.
I don't understand why you're not seeing it.
Hey, Mr. March, this
Yes.
is Mr. Byrd. If I can throw something out there that may help to clarify this point. What this resolution is identifying is the acre-foot requirement required for each dwelling unit, indoor and outdoor. I think we're all clear on that. What I would throw out there that maybe would help Ms. Kinney is when a developer provides a non-potable irrigation system using well water, that well water is their contribution requirement for the outdoor use. And so they've already satisfied that requirement, and therefore they don't have to pay any cash fees for that under this resolution.
Okay, so in that case, they are contributing to the raw water dedication. And so that's meeting the need of the 0.2 acre feet.
Yes, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you. The way that would work, if a non-potable system is provided by the developer using well water, they have satisfied their obligation for the outdoor use contribution requirements by providing the well system.
Okay. So in that case, with the scenario that Trustee Jerome brought up, what they would, if we were to compare that in money, they would be contributing $30,000 rather than the $37,000 in the scenarios where that non-potable system wasn't working. So we're looking at a delta of like 7,000.
Not quite. You're on the right track, but
Yeah.
if under Trustee Jerome's scenario, if a neighborhood with a non-pot system had their system failed and was not operating, they would be shortfalling the contribution requirement by the $30,000 for the outdoor use.
And if I might add, I'm sorry, go ahead. If I might add to that, Trustee Jerome, and this may answer your question as well, most of the covenants provide, and I believe the development agreements provide, Mr. Byrd, and you can clarify, but there generally is an understanding that we put into these agreements that in the event that the owner is just regularly watering with potable water, for example, their whole system goes down. As I recall, there's an ability for the town to go back in many of the subdivisions, I'm not saying this is uniform, and assess the difference of the current raw water cost and the past, what they actually paid. And so we have the capability in many of these agreements to come back in and assess that additional amount against that home, which is a pretty strong incentive for them to keep using that non-potable water source.
Cody's response answered my question, so I appreciate that, Cody. Thank you.
So if I may summarize a little bit, if everybody's, it seems like we do have a remedy through the development agreement to deal with the non-pot system that goes down to go recover some losses on municipal water, drinking water. And that's where you get that. That's where you get that that authority or that ability to do that. Not in this necessarily in this resolution. Is that correct?
Mr. Mayor, this is Cody Byrd. I think you're on the right track. That we may need to evaluate some of the past development agreements on a case-by-case basis to ensure that language is there. Certainly, that can be a consideration moving forward on new agreements. And the other thing I would throw out there too, which gets back to a question that was brought up by one of the trustees, but this resolution itself is not intended to define the remedies for violations or shortfall. This resolution is intended to reestablish the water dedication requirement and set the cash in lieu price.
Right, right.
Other remedies for violations would be under a separate authority.
Well, is that something that needs to be taken up later then, or just do it through development agreement?
I would suggest that it's a combination of both.
Okay.
For development agreements, we can certainly bring that into consideration.
Okay.
I would also throw out there that for further consideration by the town, it would be a very worthy discussion to have as to whether or not it's appropriate for the town to annex land if it does not have a non-potable irrigation system.
I agree.
And that's something that we'll absolutely need to consider, as would be xeriscape requirements or other landscape requirements in neighborhoods that do operate off of potable water for outdoor irrigation.
Right.
There's a number
That's
of
right.
approaches that can help with conservation efforts.
That's right. Okay. But that's not what this resolution is doing today. Everybody's clear on that, right? Okay.
And Mr.
Any other
Mayor,
questions?
Mr. Mayor, this is Mr. Byrd one more time, and I apologize for the interruption. I did want to point out, however, that this is a public hearing item, so we should.
I know.
Okay, thank you, sir.
I did have a
Thank you,
couple
though.
of comments I wanted to make. So in touching on some of the things that we've seen with this, I know that there obviously are concerns about what the impact that this will have on growth. I do also want to acknowledge that several of the comments that I have had over the last several months as we've been dealing with water issues from members of the public is that concern that it feels like the existing residents of the town have been paying the price of development or having been hit with higher costs because their development fees have not been in where they should. So I think that there is definitely a side where I believe it is responsible on our end, even if it does bring the prices up and it does slow development, to make sure that we are not putting the burden of development fees or costs onto the existing users of the water. And then on the other end of that as well, we are in a situation right now where we are trying to get our water plant caught up. We are facing some very significant issues when concerned with water. So I think that if we do see things slow down a slight bit with the growth, I don't know if that's a bad thing, because it does give us a chance to get caught up with our infrastructure in the next couple of years. And then if at that point we want to readdress the rates and maybe make that a little bit more favorable for development, I think that would be the time. But I think right now it would be a good idea to make sure that those rates are in line so that development fees aren't getting passed off onto the other citizens.
Okay, fair enough. All right, no other comment, I don't think. Let's go ahead and turn it over to the public.
Mr. Mayor, could I make
make
one comment? I would like to, I know we all received this letter from Mr. Hoover. I would suggest we could enter that into, maybe because it's a written comment sent to us, could we enter that into the minutes as
I believe Mr. Hoover is also in the attendance here today as well, so he may be able to speak to that also.
Okay.
Yeah, let's let them speak.
You bet. And my final question is the 1 year for the cash in lieu, if defined shares, if it extends beyond 1 year, do we have any ability to extend that till, 2 years? It's unclear to me.
This is Bob Gowling. Our intention would be to revisit this on a regular basis to kind of assess our performance in purchasing those shares and make suitable adjustments on at least an annual basis and perhaps more frequently.
Okay. All right. I mean, I think I understand why this is happening. The cost of our water is predicated upon the purchase price. So, with that being said, let's turn it over to the public and hear from our concerned developers and citizens.
For members of the public that would like to make a comment, if you could raise your hand and we will unmute you to make that comment. Darren, if you could please state your name and address, and then you will have time to speak.
Looks like he's still muted.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
I got you, Darren.
All right. Darren Roberson, Sage Homes, and actually just wanted to, my address is in Fort Collins, where my office is, so, but have many people that work for me that live in Wellington. Hey, one comment really quick on Ms. Kinney's comments was, in our development agreement and our covenants, it is required that all homeowners must utilize the non-pot system and cannot use potable water, or a fee for potable water can be assessed. So I do think on development agreements, they've gotten stronger. And that goes back to, you know, Cody and past, making sure that development agreements have that enacted for non-potable. One thing I want to ask is, you know, I fully understand water should go up, but more of a notice should be expected. It's hard to make up the last 3 years in one big increase. At a minimum, it would be nice to let us provide contracts of current homeowners under contract and buyers that are deciding on what to do for probably one of their biggest purchases in a lifetime to hold the current fees. So we can at least process the engineering and plans and submit for permits, and if allowed, truly need 45 days to do that process. We could even provide a list of contracts or provide contracts showing that at least these buyers were in the pipeline. Since this is such a short notice. And I do think fees should go up. But if we could do it over a timeline, possibly over maybe 3 rate increases over the next 6 to 9 months, that would even be favorable. But at least let us try to get some of these home buyers that are under contract or want to move to Wellington, at least let us try to provide for them so they can, you know, have their dream home and live in Wellington and move to the new school district that's being built. And it'll also help where appraisers, I mean, it's going to be hard to have appraisals catch up when all of a sudden, if there's not a non-pot system, how do you adjust for a $45,000 increase in water? So another comment I have is, you know, a lot of people are moving to Wellington over Timoth, Severance, or Windsor because of the value you can get in the price of a home. Now with costs higher than any other cities, they might decide to build in other communities, and that's just something to, you know, keep in mind that I know was commented before. So, but again, if anything, at least work with the builders on, you know, with this short notice of trying to get home buyers that are currently under contract at least in at the older fees over the next 30 or 45 days. We don't want to flood the market with a bunch of permits like it's done in the past, but at least let the home buyers that are under contract come in. And that's all I got.
Thank you, sir. That's a very good point. Next.
Next, we have Landon Hoover. If you would like to unmute yourself, state your name and address, you can make your comment.
Good evening, Landon Hoover with Hartford Homes. I live in Fort Collins as well. But I think I articulated most of my perspective through my email. Thank you, Trustee Whitehouse, for acknowledging that and adding that to the public record there. I still, even hearing the discussion tonight, still struggle to understand how you're the only municipality or water district arriving at these rates, and that you're the highest of the 7 surrounding that I provided, and not by a small fraction, but by 2.32 times on a per house basis. It's just the discussion tonight, not hearing a strong justification for why Wellington is truly an outlier in that, and even so much higher over market rate. Certainly understand the plan is to build cash and buy that in the future, but continuing to plan and project 40% growth is pretty, or price appreciation there is pretty outrageous in my opinion, and again something that no other municipality is doing. And then finally, I would just echo the comments of very difficult to make up a 3-year lack of action in that one foul swoop. I think that creates a whole host of issues that Darren had expressed there, and I think a more appropriate action would be to step this over time, perhaps over the next year, to have several rate increases that maybe arrive at this number. I still don't think this number can be supported based on others, but even if you arose to this, if you took action to raise it slowly over time, it seems much more reasonable than such a dramatic increase in one foul swoop. That's it. Again, thank you for taking the time to read my email, and thank you for the time this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Hoover, very much. Anyone else?
We don't have any other hands raised at this time for comment.
Okay, so let's bring it back to the board for some discussion, because those are a couple of good points that the developers brought up, and I wondered about that myself. You know, people that are currently under contract and with their homes, and then they're getting ready to, they're going to see this increase, and they've already gotten their banking in place, or they've already got their appraisals in place, and you know, it seems like some people should probably, that they're ahead of this, and maybe you know, I don't want to say grandfathered in. I don't know if that's the right term or not, but it does seem like some accommodations should have been maybe thought out for some of that. I don't think that's quite fair to do that. As far as, you know, incrementally adjusting this thing over the next year, I don't know that that's not a bad idea either. To Mr. Hoover's remarks about, you know, the shock and cost of the water increase is exactly what it is. It's a shock to us as well. And we've watched it over 2 years go up, and we've been trying to catch up ourselves, and it is reality. And there is a formula. It's mathematical, so it can be justified. Everything we've done is justified by professionals. So that there is substantiated information behind it. But I do sympathize with the comments of you know, stair stepping it, and also, you know, these current homes that are under contract or coming on quickly like this. It could really throw a lot of hook in a lot of people's you know, plans and things and investments that they're making here in this town. So those are my thoughts there. I'm kind of inclined to say, you know, I'd like to take another look at that. What are your guys' thoughts?
Sure, Mr. Mayor. So I believe Section 3 actually does address those homes that are in contract already by making an exception where if the developers can come to the town staff and show that they did already have those homes in contract and financing arranged, that exceptions can be made for that. So Mr. Byrd, would you be able to speak to that, or Mr. Gowling? I believe that is in
it is in there. I see that. Thanks for pointing that out, Trustee Gator.
And then just, this is my personal thoughts, and I appreciate the developers taking the time to share with us their concerns, and I do appreciate that. The concern that I have with doing a stair-step approach is, unfortunately, with the water situation, and again, I do appreciate the concerns, is why are we so different from other municipalities? And Mr. Gowling, maybe you can speak to this, but from what I understand, our situation with how we purchase water being tied directly to the share price of North Cooter is far different. So unfortunately, we can't do a straight across comparison to us and other utilities because we are in a very different situation in our raw costs of water. But my concern is we are in the process of looking at a near 300% increase that's going to be potentially, we don't know exactly what that's going to be, but that's going to be levied on the residents of this town. And I think that if we're looking at that, we need to be applying the same measure across the board. And yes, we are taking drastic actions, but this is not just the developers, this is also hitting the homeowners. So I personally do not feel right about saying we're going to do a slower stair-step process for one section of our community, but we're not going, we physically cannot do that. We can't afford to do that, I don't think, on either side. So I think we need to remain consistent and how we apply those changes. But Mr. Gowling, could you maybe speak to the comparing us to other municipal water sources nearby?
I can. We basically have two sources of water. One is the contract water through North Pooter, and I think that's the water you're talking about, Trustee Gator, in terms of what we pay for that. But we also have a few North Pooter shares, and there is there's a mechanism in place to deliver that water at the appropriate time to our existing water treatment plant, which we are now expanding, to treat that water and deliver it to customers. The problem, I think, when you compare us to some of these other more established water districts and municipalities, is most of those folks have a very robust water bank. Hundreds or thousands of shares. They can take ditch water, they can take CBT. Frankly, just because they're further south, they can deal with many other types of water sources, whereas right now we're primarily limited to a North Pooter water source. So because we don't have a water bank to basically buffer or frankly finance this growth, we need to be able to buy the water that's required for new customers on a one-to-one basis. We can't subsidize that with existing shares because we only have 30 of them, 30-ish. So in comparison to Elko or Northweld or Fort Collins, they have hundreds or thousands more a more robust water bank than we have. And so we don't have the ability to buffer or frankly subsidize that with our existing bank. We didn't buy shares 20 years ago when they were, 30 grand. And if we had, perhaps we could have used those to transition into a truly more market value approach, but we simply don't have that water bank to work from. So we're water poor in that sense, and we need that water immediately. And this is the only way we're going to be able to afford it, is to acquire either the shares, again, our first priority, or a fee in lieu that's adequate for us to actually buy the exact amount of water that customer is going to use.
But the other school of thought is that the developers can bring shares themselves and bypass a lot of this. If they can find shares cheaper, by all means, bring them. This is just what we've been able to do. It hasn't been that good. One component that's being forgotten is we have a water treatment plant upgrade that's part of this cost, probably 50% of the increase. And that's not, we can't escape that. It has to happen. Not everybody needs that. So, but I guess that one point to Mr. Robeson's comment in there about dealing with existing families under contract, it looks like we have means to deal with that. Is that correct? Cody or Brad?
Yeah, if I might, Mr. Mayor, two things. Yeah, that was the intent with that provision in paragraph 3, was that to the degree that there was a contract that existed and that could be established, the planning director had the ability to apply the old fees through a specific date. And the thought is at that point, you have the ability to go back to new buyers, tell them what the circumstances are. If they're going to raise their prices, they're going to raise their prices. And as someone said, one of the trustees said, that may scare away some development, but that's a business decision you have to make. One of the other points I'd make is this is not new to developers throughout northern Colorado. As an example, at one point in 2016, Hartford Land owned 17.5 shares of North Pooter. I don't know if they still have them or not, but developers have been buying water to be able to offset this. They've known what the issues are, and they've known that the costs are going up, and they've known that it's inevitable that there's going to be towns that are buying or needing to raise their water rates. That's why they bought water, many of them at cheaper rates. Now, maybe they used them elsewhere, or maybe they're committed elsewhere, but that's the reason that you're looking at raising rates, is to get those developers to start buying shares. And developers have done that before, evidence Hartford Land. Again, I don't know if they still have those shares or not, but it evidences the fact that they can find them. So we have tried to deal with the contract and the fact that the contract prices are set, and that if they can provide a contract, the planning director has the ability to deal with that. And as somebody said, there's an ability for the developers to bring shares, and that offsets the cost if the cost is too high.
Mr.
Anyone
Hart,
else want to weigh in?
yeah, real quick. Thank you for reiterating that they can bring the cost of shares in lieu of payment. I appreciate the developer's concerns regarding how the total calculation was formulated. I would like to see that formula breakdown from Mr. Gowing. And additionally, if we're putting all of this pressure and we overshoot this increase on developers and we stop residential development, then it's kind of counterproductive, and that entire cost is then put on our residential water users. So then not our residential rates, even though we increase them, if we don't have new development coming in and we overshoot this, it's the water user that's going to end up paying additionally more for this. Does that make sense? Sorry, Trustee Whitehouse, I'm getting, it looks, you've got the thinking face on. So my concern is if we just blindly approve this increased number without seeing exactly how it was calculated, I'd be more comfortable reviewing a range and approving something within a range. But I'm really concerned that if we overcompensate on this and we weren't cognizant of what we're doing, we're gonna kill the development that's supposed to be paying for this growth.
I have a comment, yes. Ashley, or Trustee McDonald, sorry, should be more formal. If I'm not mistaken, as we've been talking about raising the water rates for the home usage, I believe, I thought I heard this, but I believe that those rates were being calculated with these impact fees not being part of that equation, because in all actuality, that's how we're kind of in some of the quasi problems that we're in now, is because we have been taking those impact fees and helping to bolster the water treatment part. So if I remember right, when the new water rates have been talked about, those rates don't include taking these impact fees and subsidizing the water treatment portion. Is that correct, Tyler, or did I misunderstand? Because that kind of would go into touch into that a little bit.
Yes, Trustee Jerome, that is correct. We set the rate specifically to do that in order to avoid a problem of slowing down development or development pretty much stopping at completely 100%. Those rates would be able to sustain the water costs as well as the any CIP projects that come down the line as well.
Okay, yeah, so that's what I thought. So if development stopped tomorrow, the new rates that we're looking at would cover the expenses and we wouldn't feel that. So
well, that's kind of my concern is, so then that entire cost is put on our homeowners, our residential users, instead of the new growth coming in. Instead of it being a shared burden, it would be completely on the water user.
Well, I have a comment on that. I mean, if we're subsidizing, if we're not charging market rate for new water, the rate users that town of Wellington residents are in fact subsidizing that. We do have, we've got to, you go to the store and someone says it's $10, you're going to pay $10. If they say it's 20, I don't think we can subsidize the water as we've had in the past with continuing on with the policy that we have.
I agree with you. I think that there needs to be an increase. I just urge us to take pause and I'm really curious to know how Mr. Gowing's calculation is broken out. It may be immaterial at this point, but Mr. Hoover, he brought up a great point relative to Mr. Gowing. explained how he came to that calculation, but sometimes people, when you see that in front of you, it makes more sense than trying to understand how somebody came to a mathematical calculation through explanation verbally. So I would be more comfortable making a decision on this rate this evening if I had a clear picture of exactly how that formula is broken down.
Bob, what do you think about that? How did you get to these numbers?
Well, if you'll, I'll go ahead and share my screen and we can go through that a little bit.
Okay.
Let's see here.
Thank you, Bob, for making that available. That's really handy.
Well, I thought we might get that question. It's a great question. So this probably looks a little bit familiar. This is the same basic spreadsheet that we went through at the work session a little while back. So it looks very engineering, and I'm sorry about that. But in general, all this up here is just kind of input data. And we've assumed a 7,000 square foot lot, a 1,400 square foot house and a 400 square foot driveway that would not be irrigated. We've assumed an application of irrigation of 26 inches per year, supplemental irrigation, which is a number that's based on turf grass. These are the historic North Poudre rates, North Poudre market values from 18, 19, and the current rate. And this is the yield, which is set currently in our town code. So moving on down to indoor use, some of this is a little bit out of date, so I'll just go right down here. And actually, we'll go back over here. So some simple inflationary calculations. If you take the inflation rate over this time period, it's 40% a year. So the current value is 200,000. 1 year from now, at that rate, and we can hope that that rate will change in the future. And Mr. Hoover is absolutely correct. This is outrageous inflation, but it's kind of based on actual values. So there is the inflated market value, market price in 1 year. There it is for 2 years, and there it is for 3 years. This right here, at the current market value, per acre foot, it's about $83,000. In a year from now, if you go with this assumption of 40%, it'll be 117,000, 164, and 229. So moving back over here, this 0.32, as I mentioned earlier, is based on 90 gallons per capita per day. And that's right in the middle of kind of the benchmark for average per capita indoor consumption. And that going through the calculation of yield and how much water basically you get out of a share is 0.133 North Poudre shares. In other words, every 0.133 share will yield 0.32 acre feet. The value of that currently is $27,000. When you assume that the market value for our calculation is 280, which again was that 1 year number, that's 37,000. So the difference between these two numbers is simply 1 year of inflation at the historic inflation rate for North Poudre shares. For outdoor use, it's similar. If you just using this typical home of a 7,000 square foot lot, these numbers, you get to about 5,200 irrigated square feet. And at that application rate that we talked about earlier, supplemental irrigation application rate, that comes out to 0.26 acre feet per year. And it's the same thing. That equates, again, based on that yield, which is already in the code, 0.108 shares. The value of that, or the cost of that, I should say right now, is $21,500. And at that inflated rate of 280, it's 30,000. So I think the what this really does is it incentivizes developers to bring shares, builders to bring shares, but it also provides a realistic cost for us to procure those shares, because that's really what a fee in lieu is. We take money and we go purchase the water for them, basically. And again, a lot of utility districts with larger water banks can buffer this a little bit more than we can, but we don't really have much of a water bank. So you add that up, and for single family with non-pot, it's at 0.32. Without non-pot, it's that 0.576. There's the North Poudre shares for each, and there's the cost for each. So it's a lot of numbers on here, but the concept is fairly simple. We take a historic calculated inflation rate, apply it to current market value for 1 year, and assume that that 1 year sits in the center of the time period for which we can acquire those shares, to supply raw water for that development or for those individual homes. Is anything specific I could answer about that?
So Bob, in your scenario here, your 40% increase is a 2-year look. Is that not a 1 year look, a 2 year look?
It's a 2 year look backward. So
yeah, okay, that's good enough. So, but you're basing the water price off a 1 year look.
We're looking 1 year ahead and saying that in 1 year from when we take a developer's fee in lieu, we hope that we can purchase all the shares that are needed to provide the raw water for that project.
Well, wait a minute. So you did a 40% increase over 2 years. You made it 40% for 1 year. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's the annualized inflation rate.
Well, is it a 2 year? Is it a 40% annual or 2%?
It's 40% per year.
Okay.
That's why this is 280. That's roughly.
Well, I think it's it did go up significantly from 2019 to 2020.
Ridiculously.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
So,
what happens when it goes down? If it does go down, I mean, it is a commodity.
Again, that's part of our annual or semi-annual reevaluation of this. I think we have a few factors that we'll need to flex to in the future. The availability and just our ability to purchase.
It kind of would have to, because it's based on a market rate.
That's right. Yeah.
So as it goes up and goes down, so do the costs.
Well, relative to that, Mr. Gowing, are you basing the current market value on the last share that the town purchased, or the last sold share by the North Poudre Irrigation Company?
We asked them what they felt the current value was, and this is the number they gave us. We paid a little bit more. There's some that sold a little bit less, but in general, that's pretty close to the current average purchase price for a North Poudre share.
Thank you so much for sharing your spreadsheet. It's really helpful to have that visual breakdown of what the calculation looks like. So thank you so much for having that available.
I'm glad that helped.
So I have a question.
It's all there.
So I had a question, Mr. Gowing or Mr. Sexton. I know recently the town did just purchase 10 shares of North Poudre. Could you give us a rough estimate at what that would cost under the old cash in lieu rates as to what those 10 shares we would have been paid for those?
I know. Tyler, anyone?
Yeah, I think I can answer that if you give me a little bit of time to work the calculator here.
Yeah,
okay.
off the top of my head, I wouldn't know that.
Okay.
But I think Bob can handle that.
Thank you, Mr. Gowing.
We basically have charged 19,000 or the fee in lieu for half an acre foot. That's roughly 91,000 per share.
So 91,000. So it would have been roughly $900,000 that we would have received for those 10 shares.
No, I'm sorry. I thought you were asking. So the 19,000 roughly fee in lieu that's currently in effect. would purchase a North Poudre share of a value of 91,000. So that proportion is roughly
Almost
the
a
same.
half. It's almost a half a share.
Okay.
Right.
So was the 91,000, that was for the entirety of 10 shares what we would have received? Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I'm probably not understanding your question.
Okay. So our town purchased just recently 10 shares of North Poudre. So I'm just trying to figure out under the calculations, because obviously that was cash we received in lieu of shares from developers over the years. Under the current rates without changes, what would we have received for cash in lieu for the entirety of those 10 shares? Does that make sense?
That does make sense. So about 44% of what we got. So or actually we got 44% of what we could have gotten back then. So in other words, we're charging roughly half. We were charging, and we're currently charging roughly half of what it's worth.
Okay, so we would have received, so just, I'm trying to put numbers here. So roughly $1 million would have been the money that we took in. Is that correct? Because we paid $2 million for 10 shares of North Poudre, over $2 million. And so that's what I'm trying to get at, is if we received less than $1 million for those 10 shares, this is not sustainable in any way, shape, or form, because that is a huge, I'm sorry, we do not have the funds to finance that, because we are drastic. I mean, those shares were meant to go for a lot more than 10 shares if that's what we received, if that makes sense.
Right. So what we paid $2 million for, we basically pulled in money, about half of that, about 900,000.
Okay. So that's kind of my concern with this, where I don't see that this is something we can wait on, because we are, I mean, again, we are getting ready to make massive changes to the residential water rates because of the dire financial situation of our water fund. Obviously, these are a separate area of the fund, but at the same time, we cannot be doing a 50%. We can't afford any subsidization, but I mean, a 50% subsidization is absolutely outside of what we can afford to do. So
I mean, I would suggest the town is not in a position to give away 10%. I mean, you don't buy it and sell it for less than you bought it for. I mean, I did want to make a comment about doing a stepped approach, which was suggested. While this may seem like a good idea, and I think Mr. Bird can answer this, if we were talking about a stepped increase in fees over a year, what is to prevent anyone from coming in and buying, paying for all their water in one go, even though they're not going to bring their houses online for a year or two? I believe something like this happened in the past, and that may be the downside of trying to do a stepped increase, because they can see the price is going to go up and probably come in and buy sooner. Maybe Mr. Bird could address that.
Thanks, Mr. Whitehouse. I'll start the conversation. To be honest, that is one of the concerns that staff has had, and it's been expressed by board members, was if we change the fee and increase it, do we get an influx of permits applied for just on spec, trying to beat the fee increase? And the third provision, or paragraph 3 of the proposed resolution, was staff's proposal to try to help alleviate that concern, that we would like for the fees to take effect and allow any contracts currently in place to honor the old fees, to prevent a flood of new permit applications just to beat the fees.
It'd have to be tied to a contract.
You're right, Mayor, and that is staff's proposal. I do think, though, that there is some merit to one of the other comments raised by both a developer and one of our trustees tonight, is that one-time increase sustainable, or should it be considered to spread it out? If that were the will of the board, I think it would be possible to do a stepped approach, knowing that we're establishing a cutoff date for the applications with a contract, and make that time limited. But the stepped approach would allow the development community to increase their fees respectively, with those planned incremental steps. Not to be, or certainly we don't want to be remiss, that would result in a loss to the town to allow that approach. But there is a balancing act, I think, as one of our trustees pointed out, and has been expressed by the development community.
What would it take to go figure out, step out, and approach?
Well, I guess my recommendation would be, if that was a desire, we would establish the time frame under which it was rolled out. And if it were, say, 3 steps, one at the adoption of the resolution, one a period from now, and then the final step another period from now, equal proportions, you'd basically take the current proposed fee and divide it by 3 to get your stepped increases, and then just establish how much time passes between each step.
I personally am not comfortable with that, just at the rate at which we are going backwards. We are already negative quite a bit on this, and this needs to be addressed. My preference would be, if we are going to look at some type of a stepped approach, I would prefer to enact the changes now, and then we can revisit the potential of stepping things back over the next month or so. And if the board so feels inclined to enact a reduced rate further, then we can do so. But I would like to see that we make changes now so that we stop bleeding money. We can go back to the drawing table with developers and see if the board is willing to adjust the rates back down. That would be my preference if we're going to consider doing a stepped rate. But I personally would not be in favor of doing that right now.
I might make a comment. One of the concerns that staff had with a stepped approach is this is a 2-pronged problem, as everybody has recognized. We have a problem relative to new housing coming online and the need to provide water supplies for that new housing, raw water. We also have a problem with the fees, and currently the fees are upside down. If you do a stepped approach, the concern that was out there was that what you've done is you've actually encouraged development to speed up. So because you're giving people water at less than the actual cost. So you're going to have people to avoid hitting the actual cost and knowing it's going to keep going up, you're going to have a flood of new houses, was the concern. That has the effect of not having enough water to offset it. But on the other side of the prong, the other effect that it has is you now have more water use. And one of the things the board has looked at is on the rates, perhaps the board can subsidize somewhat the local residents with a stepped up basis. It's kind of the opposite of what Trustee McDonald said. If you have more water use because you have more new houses that come on, the effect of that is you're further upside down from the additional water use, and you've just compounded the regular fee issue. And so when we looked at that, we said we don't really want to encourage development by subsidizing development, because you're impacting all the residents who are currently users of water in the town, if that makes sense.
Hi, I have a, we are likely raising, of course, this is an upcoming topic, water rates for residents soon, right? So they don't get to have a water sale for months while they decide what their plans are. They just have to start paying the higher rates. So if we're doing the thing where we're going to continue giving a 50% off water sale to developers, I mean, that's how I can simplify it, right? So that's my concern. My other comment is that I would like to limit our town legal comments to legal related items, please.
Oh, excuse me again, say that one more time about the town legal.
I'd like to limit the town attorney comments to legal items, please.
Well, wait a minute. I don't know about that. He's been involved with some of this. Now it's kind of important to have him.
Sure. Well, that's an opinion of mine. I'm just
right. Okay. Anyone else want to weigh in?
Yeah, I have a comment. I mean, as we have looked at the utility rate increases for the current residents, I mean, we recognize the issue here, and in the same, and on this aspect, we're also talking about raising it. But one of the things we have to remember is we all have a fiduciary responsibility to make the proper decisions to keep this town running, and to say, well, we're not going to charge the full rate. I mean, then we're neglecting our fiduciary responsibilities. And I don't think that's a really good idea. And that's my opinion. But I think if we see the fact that we're bleeding money out, that we really need to address this. And I understand that it's going to be a hardship for people, the developers as well as our residents.
Anyone else like to weigh in? Final comments?
I agree with Tim on his comment about the fiduciary responsibility, but I'd also like to take it a step farther. We have a fiduciary responsibility to the residents of this town that live here, and are going to be shouldering these higher rates. We are all included in that. We all live in this town. We're all going to feel the pain of higher rates. So we just have to remember, is unpopular as it really is, in the long run, this is for the best for our residents and the health of this town, for it to continue moving forward. It may be slowed moving forward, but it's still going to move forward. So I think we just need to buckle down and do the right thing and move forward and take care of it.
Anyone else?
I'm ready to vote.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
yes.
I did get one question in the question and answer box, as it's an anonymous attendee, asking why is there no other municipality water district projecting 40.2% inflation?
Point of order, whoever asked the question needs to identify themselves with their full name and address to be considered, in my opinion.
Yep, and well, that's absolutely correct. And I mean, again, we've been beaten. The reason why our water, the reason why our water is so high is because of the contractual relationship that we have to buy it. Period and paragraph. It's all numbers, and that's what we have. They have a different arrangement. We don't. We're working hopefully on a different arrangement in the future. Maybe it might change these things. That's the goal for everybody. This is not palatable where we're at for anyone. The only reason why this step approach kind of resonated with me was because we're also giving our citizens a chance at some scenarios here to weigh in on what they like and how they want to go about paying it. We didn't give these guys really anything to look at. We're just rolling it out on them. It is reality. No one's disputing that. I am encouraged that we gave them the option here, at least, to work with the people that are under contract right now. I'm glad that we're able to work with that. I don't think that's fair because they signed on for something else. They might go somewhere else had they known this. So no, I don't think it's fair to pass that on to them. They'll get it, and they'll get it in the rate increase, as would like the rest of us. So I don't have much more to say. I wish we were in a different position, but we're not. We're working towards that one. Everybody needs to know that diligently. Unfortunately, the costs have gotten ahead of that mission. So if that's the case, if no one else has anything more to say, let's, if we put this resolution to a vote, are there any changes that we need to add here? Did we cover any of those, or is this thing ready to roll out?
There's the date and some grammatical changes.
Okay.
From what I've noted in section 1 and 3.
Okay, so noted. Anything else, Brad or Cody? Did we hear anything that
we'll correct the commas and the other stuff.
Yeah,
absolutely, Mr. Mayor. This is Mr. Byrd. The only other the comment that came out of the public hearing portion that I think maybe didn't get resolved or didn't really get addressed was the time period of the contractual agreements that have entered into by buyers. The resolution we acknowledged adequately satisfies the need to cover existing contracts that were entered into as of the effective date of the resolution. However, the question was, is 30 days enough time to adequately get all the paperwork and everything submitted. Currently, the resolution has a cutoff date, and I think what I heard in the public comment was 45 days acceptable instead of the 30.
I was about to pose to the board, would we be comfortable with doing 60 days just to give
Sure.
that?
I don't think it's going to make much difference.
I would be comfortable with doing 60 days. Would that cause any problems, Mr. Byrd, on your end if we just extend that from September 15th to the 15th of October?
This is Mr. Byrd, and that doesn't cause any concern from me. I want to point out that as the resolution is worded, the contract for sale with that buyer, between the buyer and the home builder, has to be in effect and executed as of the effective date of the resolution.
Yes. Yes.
So if that is how it's understood by the board, then
yes,
the time frame under which they have to submit their paperwork is inconsequential in terms of how the fees would be applied. What we didn't want to do was have an open-ended lasting forever. We wanted to have a cutoff date just for terms of tracking staff time and how long is that agreement going to sit on the table and come back and the fees have been updated 3 times and then all of a sudden the contract emerges. So we wanted to have a cutoff date, but staff is comfortable with an extended period of time for the builders and the buyers to get that paperwork submitted.
So what's the new date?
I'm proposing that we do a date of October 15th, which would effectively offer 60 days for them to get all the paperwork in.
Okay.
And I know that one developer mentioned in public comment 45 days would be nice. So I figure if we go 60, that should give us a little bit of extra room to get that in.
Yeah, I'd like to give them everything we can, everybody, you know, that's absolutely. So anyone else have an objection to that?
Is that a purchase date, or is that to, I guess,
that's simply,
they have 45 days to submit paperwork to the town. Is that what you're saying?
They have 60 days to pay the fees to the town. So they would have to have a contract in place with the buyer as of the date that this goes into effect, which would be, I believe, today or tomorrow. And then they would have 60 days to work out with the town to provide proof that they did have that contract in place as of the date or prior to the effect. They would just have 60 days to get everything processed with the town, and they would still be paying the rates as of when their contract went into effect before the changes. But they could not enter into a contract sometime within the 60 days. If they did that, they would be paying the new rates.
Gotcha. Okay. I just wanted clarification. I was a little unclear. Thanks.
Is that what your thoughts were too, Cody? Is that dovetail?
That's exactly right. Mr. Gator nailed it. Yes.
All right. All right. Thanks for clearing that up, guys. So let's go ahead and entertain a motion with these corrections.
I move that we accept resolution number 28-2020, raw water dedication fee in lieu rate changes, with the changes to the date, as well as the grammatical changes, and with the change to section 3 that says no reduced payments allowed by this paragraph shall be accepted by the town after September 15th to read October 15th, 2020.
Can I get a second?
I second.
Let's do a roll call.
Trustee Gator,
Yes.
Trustee Jerome,
Yes.
Trustee Kenny,
Yes.
Trustee McDonald,
I support the increase, but I do not support the increase as presented. My vote is no.
Trustee Knutson,
Abstain, and follow up with that. I had some technical difficulties, so it's due to conflict.
Trustee Whitehouse,
Yes.
Mayor Hammond,
Yes. Let's move on. Item 3. Ordinance number -16-2020. An ordinance amending section 2-2-70 of the Wellington Municipal Code as it relates to special meeting notification. Brad.
As set forth, and we gave you both a staff report as well as the ordinance itself. This is mostly a cleanup. The ordinance earlier this year the board went to electronic postings on the internet rather than postings in place for meetings. When that was done, that was as a result of legislative changes from the Colorado State Legislature that encouraged internet postings because they were thought to be more effective in today's world. That was changed for regular meetings. It wasn't changed for special meetings. Particularly in conjunction with the pandemic, we've had a number of special meetings, tonight being an example, that we've had to have a meeting and give notice under the special meetings section, and it's just burdensome. I mean, to post 3 places, we're not doing that for regular meetings. People look on the internet for them. We're delivering things to board members' homes when it's easier to email them, which is what the old ordinance said. And that's incredibly impactful in staff time. So this is just an effort to streamline the process in accordance with what we do with regular meetings.
The board members got a comment on this? No? Let's open it up to the public then.
Members of the public would like to speak on this, please raise your hand at this time. Mr. Mayor, I don't see anyone wishing to make a comment.
Okay, we'll bring it back to the board. There were no comments on this. Can we get a motion to approve ordinance number 16-2020?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Gator,
Yes.
Trustee Jerome,
Yes.
Trustee Kenny,
Yes.
Trustee McDonald,
Yes.
Trustee Knutson,
Yes.
Trustee Whitehouse,
Yes.
Mayor Hammond.
Yes. Okay, that does it for action items. We're going to move, I've got 9:15. We're into item D. We are going to now enter a liquor review board. To do that, I'll need a roll call.
Trustee Gator,
Here.
Trustee Jerome,
Here.
Trustee Kenny,
Present.
Trustee McDonald,
Present.
Trustee Knutson,
Here.
Trustee Whitehouse,
Here.
Mayor Hammond.
Here. Okay, first one, Brad.
Mr. Mayor, if I might, if I could give you a little bit of an overview, just because we've changed the process up a little bit. I don't think that's particularly substantive, and it's probably a technical change. The clerk pointed out, and is a great point, the way that the state law is written is that the board, as to renewal hearings, may, it does not say shall, may cause a hearing on the application for renewal to be held. At that point, what that has been interpreted by many municipalities to say is that the board may approve without a posting a renewal application or disapprove it. And if there is an objection, the board can then hold a hearing. So we're not treating this as a hearing that has been posted. We're just presenting to the board. The board can renew it. There is the potential that someone could then object to whatever way the board comes out, and we would then hold a hearing later. But as long as there's no objection, the renewals would be approved. So that it's a new process. It's probably somewhat technical, but I wanted to alert the board that that's the way we handled these 2 renewals. Both of them should be relatively clear cut. There was one on Hong Investments that they are the owner. They mark themselves as the owner, I believe, on the application, and in reality, there's a lease. They've changed their application to reflect that they own it individually, and their company leases it, and that's the way it was shown in past renewals. So that's a minor change. It's been addressed, and it's been that box has been rechecked as rented. The police reports are in there. As is noted in the staff reports, they are corporations in good standing, We see no reason not to renew the application for Hong Investments for a beer and wine liquor license.
Okay. Hey, board members, have any comments on Hong's liquor license? Papa's Table. Doesn't look like it. Any public comment then, just for grins? Probably not.
I don't see any hands raised at this time.
Okay, all right, let's bring it back to the board. Let's go ahead and entertain a motion to approve the liquor license for Hong Investments.
Make a motion to approve the annual renew for beer and wine liquor license for Hong Investments LLC, doing business as Papa's Table.
Second.
A roll call, please.
Trustee Gator,
Yes.
Trustee Jerome,
Yes.
Trustee Kenny,
Yes.
Trustee McDonald,
Yes.
Trustee Knutson,
Yes.
Trustee Whitehouse,
Yes.
Mayor Hammond.
Yes. Okay, Brad, who's next?
Same thing, we on Mini Mart, there were some issues last year related to Mini Mart. Those seem to have been addressed. We didn't, the sheriff's report is included. They are in good standing. We'd recommend renewal of the Mini Mart fermented malt beverage license.
Okay. Any board members' comments? Any public, Crystal?
There are no hands raised at this time.
Okay, we'll take a motion to approve the liquor license for the Mini Mart.
I move that we approve the annual renewal of fermented malt beverage for Mini Mart Incorporated, doing business as Loaf and Jug.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Gator,
Yes.
Trustee Jerome,
Yes.
Trustee Kenny,
Yes.
Trustee McDonald,
Yes.
Trustee Knutson,
Yes.
Trustee Whitehouse,
Yes.
Mayor Hammond.
Yes. Okay, thank you. I got 9:21. We're going to exit our liquor board and resume our regular board meetings. We're in a section of reports now. Town attorney, citizen initiative update.
I've given you a memo on the initiated ordinance has been presented to the clerk, which was somewhat of an explanation, or an attempt to provide somewhat of an explanation of the process. We're probably, as it indicates in the memorandum, dates are scattered throughout probably 6 titles of the Colorado Revised Statutes, as well as the Constitution. As a result of that, we have a significant number of dates that have to be met. One of those dates that apparently is that it's going to have to be met particularly, and we'll probably ask that the work session next week has an action item on them. The state statute requires that if we're going to have a coordinated election with the county, there's a need to get an IGA with the county. Likewise, if we're not going to have a coordinated election with the county, we need to get an agreement to that effect. And that agreement has to be completed, I believe, by August 25th, which obviously is cutting a little bit short. That's the last meeting this board has of the month. And so we'll probably be bringing you at the work session the proposed agreement with the county, which would envision currently, and certainly the board, we'd like some input, the cost of the county election. Initially, we were told for the town to participate, it was as much as $77,000 just to be in a coordinated election with the county. It looks like that number will come down substantially to the $20,000 range. The clerk feels that she can do an independent election separate from the county ballot on the matter at a significantly reduced cost and do a mail-out ballot. Assuming that that is acceptable, and that would be the clerk's recommendation as I understand it, we'll probably bring that agreement to you next week that would provide for an election that the town would run rather than it being on the general election ballot.
Okay.
So could I have a request, because I know we're up against a time frame on this?
Yes,
is that okay, Mr. Mayor, if I make a request?
Sure.
Okay. I understand the situation, and we talked about this on Thursday. Could the town staff bring to that, if we are going to be making a decision at the work session, an agreement for both? If we want to do a local special election, as well as if we want to participate in a county election, that way we can have the discussion as a board at the work session, and either way that we decide that we feel that we want to go that direction, we can enact that, versus just assuming that we are going to do the one over the other. Can we have the wording for both, so whichever direction the board feels that we need to go, we can act on that, so there's no delay?
Will do.
Thanks.
One other thing we may do, and this is aside from the report, one of the things that the clerk and I talked about as we have gone through more and more of the COVID-19 issues, and we've done these remotely, we've found we've had more and more action items on the work session. We may clarify the work session to provide that if it's properly posted, a work session can be treated as a regular meeting, so as to, we don't have to treat them as special meetings. So we may bring you that in the next, probably not next meeting, but the following one.
Whatever you think is sufficient, that's good. Okay.
Okay.
I know there's a significant cost difference between a mail ballot and a polling ballot. And I apologize if this question was already answered. Is Ms. Zucker envisioning doing a mail ballot specifically for this if we do our own special election within the town?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Brad. We'll see you at the work session on that one, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Town administrator.
Thank you, Mayor and Board of Trustees. I wanted to quickly loop back about economic development services. To give the public a little bit of background, at our last regular meeting, we did bring a firm as a proposal to provide temporary economic development services through the end of December. Having done some more due diligence of some of our board members, we realized that firm had previously done work for the town of Wellington, and it was not work that we felt was efficient or that met our quality of standard. Having that information in front of us, I would like to ask the board what type of steps you would like to move forward with. I think there's three potential options. We could do a request for proposals. Most likely that would take about 2 months just so we could advertise that RFP and then interview and get those firms back. And that would be for economic development services. That could be a study. There could be anything that the board should wish to do within that. We could hire an economic development manager, but with that, I think we're a little bit constrained knowing that we don't have a town administrator in place right now. And so a high-level executive may be hard to recruit. And then the third option may be that we just wait until the town administrator is hired to discuss any next steps regarding economic development. But I wanted to bring this back to the board tonight to see what your wishes were. And of course, I will follow up based on your request.
Ms. Helling, what would be the benefit to the board to do an RFQ for this situation instead of an RFP, since we were a little nervous about some of the qualifications and performance of the previous proposal?
Absolutely. We could do an RFQ for this.
So I would like to see us go the route of finding a firm in the interim. I think that trying to encourage and one, support our local businesses that we have now, but two, trying to, again, encourage more commercial development here is important. So I would like to see us move forward. So I would like to see us go the route of bringing in a firm in the interim until we do have a town administrator.
I agree with Trustee Gator's remarks completely. I think we need to move quickly with the firm, and then when we do have a town administrator, then we can move forward with the individual. I think that's just the best move personally.
my question to my fellow board members is are we more concerned about the cost of the firm, or are we more concerned about the cost of qualification, that value of bringing in a qualified firm?
Anyone?
My concern is if we were to hire an individual or move forward with that without having a town administrator as their direct boss, I think that's a difficult situation to be put in versus doing a purposefully temporary solution until we come to our final solution.
Well, Trustee Kenny, for clarification, an RFP gives us a request for proposal that includes, we look more closely at the cost of the firms and do a comparison of the cost, whereas an RFQ is a request for qualifications. So it's a more in-depth analysis of the qualifications of the firm and not so much on price. So I'm curious to know, are we looking for a firm for quality, or are we looking for a firm for cost efficiency?
I personally want somebody who's going to do something.
My priority is speed to get someone into a position doing something. That's honestly my priority. So whether that relates to cost or quality, I guess I would.
Well, yeah, but that's a good point, Trustee Kenny. I mean, you can be real quick and put someone in there, but what if they're not that good?
To be honest, that's why I'm kind of relying on the firm concept rather than an individual in this case. So someone who has a history of doing similar work, I guess qualifications in this case. So depending on what solution is the faster solution, I guess maybe that would determine my thing. Because obviously we're not going to hire someone or a firm that's completely grossly underqualified or incapable, but
well, in the speed, to answer your question, the RFQ, which is request for qualifications, or RFP, they would both take about the same amount of time. So I could allow that time to solicit firms, to interview those firms, and then to bring it back to the board. So my estimation is it would still take about 2 months in order to enable that process to run smoothly, so we can ensure we have a good pool of firms that apply.
I misunderstood the question. Sorry, Trustee McDonald, but 2 months sounds like the best possible option. So
pretty fast for government.
Yeah.
I'm fine with going with looking at qualifications to Trustee McDonald's standpoint.
Anyone else?
Qualifications.
No? Qualifications is where we would, yeah.
I agree with the qualifications.
Okay.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you there. That's good. All right then, we got done. Do we have anything from the staff tonight? Not really?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay, okay. I know we don't have anything from the board tonight.
Sorry, Mayor, I do have two items.
My God.
So
let's hear it. Let's hear it.
All right. So the first item is for town staff. I have been getting several comments from citizens about concerns with water bills, and there's been a lot of fluctuation and bills coming in incredibly high and usage looking as if it's much higher than it should be. And so I've been getting a lot of comments about concerns on that. So I don't know if town staff knows what has been driving that, because we haven't made any changes. But if you don't know the answer now, if we could get that answer and maybe make sure that we figure out what's going on with billing, especially with upcoming potential changes, we need to make sure that we are on spot with our billing process and tracking process, because with the changes we're looking to make, we want to make sure that there are no errors on our side.
John, let me ask you, did you say you got questions about the amount of water that people are using?
Correct. So they were saying, and it looked like all of a sudden their usage spiked. They're like, I haven't used my water any more than I normally do, but my usage spiked, therefore my bill spiked. Even in my own personal bill, there's some oddities that I don't understand where it's looking normal and all of a sudden it spikes, and that's not a month that we did anything extra in water. So maybe it's just an understanding of how water is being tracked. And again, that's why I said I don't know the answer, but I want to make sure that we have that figured out and explained to the citizens, because obviously people are noticing that now with the lower water rates that we have. With the changes we're looking at making, those differences are really going to stand out. And so I want to address those now before we get to that point.
Absolutely. I've had a couple of the same ones, Kelly. So
Okay.
I don't know what
So,
we can do.
Sure. Thanks, Trustee Gator. We will get back to you. I don't have a response tonight, but let me work with our team and see if there's any discrepancies there, or if anything, we'll be back with a report about what's going on.
Okay,
thank you.
I appreciate that. And then, Mayor, my second item is just a request for the board. I would really like to see us focus a little bit more on the transparency and the optics of what we're doing. The case point would be the issue with the economic development firm. I have absolutely no problem with how things have come out. I appreciate that those concerns were brought to the attention to the board. The concern that I do have is the way that that happened is we actually did specifically have a work session to talk about this economic development firm. And in that meeting, there were no concerns raised by any members of the board. And then in the preceding few days, we did have emails that explained there were concerns. And then the item was pulled from the public agenda with no explanation. And to me, it's just a concern if the optics of that do not look good. And so I totally understand the reasoning behind it. I don't disagree with the outcome of that, but I would just request that we try to really make sure that when we do have something that changes outside of the public meetings, that if we are making those decisions in public meetings, that there is an explanation to the public of what happened at the time, not after the fact.
Good point, John. Both of them. Thanks for bringing them up. Okay. I got 9:34. Brad, you want to take us into executive session?
I do. Hold on, let me get you there. Well, maybe I do. Can you hear me?
It says I need a motion to go into executive session. I think that's correct, is it?
You do. You need a motion to go into executive session.
Okay.
You would be
right.
Mayor Hammond, I apologize. Is there any other trustees that had any other? I heard Trustee Gator's comments.
Okay. Yeah, sorry about that.
That's
apologies.
okay. Well,
Anyone
in light
else?
of Trustee Gator's comments, I wanted to provide just a quick snapshot. Attended the North Poudre Irrigation Company regular board meeting this morning. There's not a lot of information to report there. Some interesting things to note is that they have 3 shares that are closing tomorrow at $190,000. And they were talking in depth a little bit about the NISP project. There wasn't a lot of information that I felt would be relevant to bring back to the board, so I didn't provide any written notes. Additionally, I've recently attended the Housing Authority Board, and they expressed some significant concerns about the water rates. I encourage the director of the Housing Authority Board to provide a letter from the board expressing their concerns and if they wanted to weigh in on the topic. So I hope that comes to the town administration sometime soon. And then additionally, I was contacted by a Poudre School District board member this morning. And I've passed that communication on to Mayor Hammond and Kelly Houtling because it was more appropriate for them to address the concerns from this Poudre School District board member relative to the meeting that they held last night. Their meetings are held at the same time that ours are. So it makes it difficult for us to kind of stay on pulse with what's going on with them. So that's all I've got. Thank you for Mayor Hammond for pausing for a moment.
Well, sure. I didn't mean to cut everybody off. My fault. Anyone else?
I wanted to thank the members of the public that did join and stick with us for so long. I do appreciate your input and that you're involved. Thank you.
Okay. All right then. I got 9:37. Can I get a motion to go into executive session?
I move that we enter executive session.
If I might, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay. For the record, you need to state that the purpose of going into executive section, and I appreciate this is on the agenda already, but as stated on the agenda, it's conferences with negotiators for the town as allowed pursuant to section 246402-4E1 for the purposes of determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiation, and instructing negotiators relative to the needs to lease or acquire space for new town facility. These section, because this is not an attorney section, it would be, or attorney advice, it would input, it would be as required by CRS 246402 2D.5. The executive sessions would be electronically recorded and the record would be preserved for 90 days through November 9th, 2020.
Okay, I have one motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Gator,
Yes.
Trustee Jerome,
Yes.
Trustee Kenny,
Yes.
Trustee McDonald,
Yes.
Trustee Knutson,
Yes.
Trustee Whitehouse,
Yes.
Mayor Hammond.
Yes.
So at this time, if we can ask members of the public to exit the meeting, and I will be changing out the recording if you can give me just a second.
Sure, sure. Take 5 minutes.
Mayor, can we take 5? I need to use little
Take
boy's room.
5. Yep, take 5. Take 5.